We are live. Women are in our shared future biodiversity day live interviews. And with me today is I'm Claire from Women for Biodiversity doing communications. And this is Isabela Hernandez from Ministry of Environment in Dominican Republic. So our theme for Biodiversity Day is building a shared future for all life and earth. So we're connecting this with the role of women. This is why our title and hashtag is women are in our shared future. To start with our interview, we would ask Isabella to introduce herself for a bit. And Isabella, may you share a bit about the work you do in the in the Ministry of Environment in Dominican Republic?
Of course. Hi to all. Hi to all people around the country and around the world. I'm Isabela Hernandez. I'm currently the head of the Invasive Alien Species Division of the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources in the Dominican Republic. But I am as well one of the main characters that deal with the national strategy of biodiversity and conservation here in the country. I have been working with biodiversity and the six national reports since many years. I think it's gonna be 5 years here and now, and it has been a pleasure and a major work because even though we are working so hard to conserve our biodiversity, we are lacking some I don't know how to say integration and mainstreaming to achieve as it happened with the Aichi biodiversity targets as we saw.
Oh, so you've been working in biodiversity even during the ICE targets were being drafted, or from 2011 you were already
With
uh
the No, I was with the evaluation of the how we get out with the Aichi biodiversity targets, and because in 2011 I have to be real that I was at school, but with within the 10 years we had to make an evaluation with the six national report about how we managed to get with the Aichi biodiversity targets, not only as a national level, but at a global level with a five global outlook.
that's great. Yeah. Um for the viewers, the Aichi biodiversity targets are implemented are part of the strategic plan for biodiversity from 2011 to 2020. And after 2011 to 2020, so that plan is the one that guided the 196 countries parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity, which Dominican Republic is part of. So that guided the biodiversity policy of each country from 2011 to 2020. And from 2020, for the next 30 years, it's going to be the post 2020 global biodiversity framework, which we will be talking about in a while later. But before that, I'd like to go first to the theme of the biodiversity today, which is building a shared future for all life on Earth. And since we're on the topic of women and girls, so for you, Isabella, in your work for biodiversity, both in the ground and in policy, and I guess also invasive alien species, how do you see the role of women and girls as important in this work?
Well, it is the most obvious statement to say that there is not future life, of course, referring to human life without women. Let me be honest and tell you that this biodiversity thing made me very, very happy. It addresses so many crucial issues as future, building, and most important, all life. We are getting out of the anthropomorphic point of view and realizing that all lives are in stake right now. We have proven among several years with the Aichi biodiversity targets that I just mentioned that we cannot build without integrating these key actors that are women and girls. Women and girls take part of a very crucial mechanism in conservation. I, I can dare to say here in the Dominican Republic that women are leading the organizations and initiative in conservation for biodiversity, as well in forestry, and these brigades that we have here to plant trees and make our forest cover bigger. These women are leading all these mechanisms, and it has been like we know it in the field, we know it, but it needs to be shown to the world. It needs to be measured to count within a scientific and indicating manner.
Oh, that sounds exciting. So you mean in Dominican Republic, women already had an active role in biodiversity conservation. I would like, if possible, may you be able to share more about this? Is it in forest you mentioned? Can you share a bit more, like, and maybe a success story or an example of a case study in Dominican Republic? If something comes to mind to you now, it would be great.
Yeah, of course. I remember that it went out in one of the documents that had the CBD, that is the Convention of Biological Diversity, that it was trying to prove how they are enhancing the gender perspective within the national strategies. And it went out as an example how women are engaging in the Dominican Republic within these brigades to plant these trees and to enhance the forest cover in the Dominican Republic. And I have been looking in the field work that these brigades are made like 80% of women. I don't know why. I don't think that men doesn't care about that, but I don't know why women are very connected with this kind of initiatives and they really want to engage in this.
Were they active perhaps in access to forest resources? Like, for example, harvesting fruits and plant species for food and maybe gathering firewood? Were they active in that? I guess. Like, I am just assuming here because that's what I noticed from other case studies at least.
I don't think if I understood the question, if
I
women
mean,
are involved.
so you mean because they're involved with the conservation, right, of the forest, if I'm correct. So I was thinking if it's somehow connected with their access. Like, since they're involved with the conservation, did they also have free access to the resources of forest? Like, for example, maybe gathering, um, harvesting edible plant species and maybe gathering
Mm-hmm.
firewood. Yeah. So yeah, so I wanted to understand how women access the resources in those cases.
Okay, something interesting here is that with the uh, environmental law, the national environmental law in the Dominican Republic, all the natural resources belong to the state. Even
Mm,
though,
okay.
if you plant it, okay, it's yours, and if it's within your property, it's yours. But all the other, like the forest resources that you just mentioned, they belong to the state. So when we're talking about these plantations of forests and enhancing the forest cover, we're talking just not at a fruit level trees, we're talking of endemic and native species that need to be put in these areas because they are lacking a forest cover, and this is where they get in. So that's why I found it so interesting because they are not beneficial, like it's not a beneficial initiative if you see like in this point of view that they cannot harvest the fruits of these forests because they have no important fruits, but they are benefiting themselves and their community, enhancing the ecosystem services within their community, planting these trees.
So it's about enhancing the ecosystem services. It's those there's a way that they benefit through the forest ecosystem services. Yeah, I guess, and that would translate to, I guess, like, in my region at least, forests are very important watersheds because in my area there are a lot of typhoons, flooding. So I guess. But how about in Dominican Republic? How are what's the usual ecosystem services that are particularly useful for forests?
Well, water is one of the main eco services that we get from these forests and the mountain forest areas. But we are an island and we are in the
Mm.
Caribbean, so we're gonna be well. We are very affected by the climate change and these um, phenomena that have been taking place in the past years and the present years. Now we have this, I don't know how to say it in English, the Sahara stuff. And we
Mm-hmm.
are suffering of a very intense heat wave, and it's always a challenge for islands and small. We're not so small, but for islands in general, sorry, because we are near to near with the coast. So every storm, every hurricane, you need to conserve your mangroves. You need to conserve your coastal forests and your. And some people doesn't realize the connection between the coral reefs and the ocean currents and the dunes. And when these ocean currents come very aggressively to the coast, you need to have your dunes. That's another ecosystem that people take for granted. um I don't know, I always explain to people that ask me several times, like, how do I get benefits from this iguana? Why conserving this iguana is important to me? And I always explain to them there is an invisible chain. You cannot imagine how we are all connected. And you have to consider whatever life you are looking around, because you cannot imagine how it is affecting your life or benefiting your life.
Yeah, I guess I would agree with that. The connection of everything in when it comes to biodiversity and of course the interconnection also with climate change, how biodiversity loss and climate change are interconnected. So yeah. So that's really interesting that women have already have I mean are very active in forest conservation in Dominican Republic. So earlier we already mentioned the IG targets and of course the its successor, the post 2020 global biodiversity framework, which vision is which has a vision of living in harmony with nature by 2050. So why connected with what we were talking about earlier, why would you say that gender equality is important to realize the vision of living in harmony with nature by 2050, which is the vision of the post 2020 global biodiversity framework?
Yeah, uh, I don't know how to say it more clearly. Gender equality is necessary. It's not important. It's necessary to us to achieve this post 2020 biodiversity framework, and it was necessary to achieve the Aichi biodiversity targets. I always mention that for the Aichi biodiversity targets, we had a target 14 that addresses women, but it addresses women as like a general matter, and it was not addressed to women. Like, women were part of this target that we're talking about ecosystem services and women and communities, but it was a very broad target, and we did not manage to get gender equality mainstreaming in the Aichi biodiversity targets with that target. So that's why I'm always worried and concerned that we need to be stronger. We do need to have gender equality and a gender perspective to achieve these targets for biodiversity, because women are a very important a part of the population, and women take part in a very different manner in the conservation activities that take place around the world.
Yeah, I remember in the UN biodiversity meetings, the recent Convention on Biological Diversity meetings in Geneva, that Dominican Republic was one of the parties that supported us a standalone gender equality target 22, and you were even I remember you were even one the risk representative who joined our Women for Biodiversity's action in adopting Target 22 this 2022. So, before I go into that question, I would also like to share with our uh viewers the the just the very basic text for the proposed standalone gender equality target. Let me share my screen very quickly. So basically, the proposed standalone gender equality target is to ensure women and girls equitable access and benefits from conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity, as well as their informed and effective participation at all levels of policy and decision making related to biodiversity. So basically, it's about women and girls' access and benefits, and of course, their participation, which I believe is already happening somehow in Dominican Republic with what Isabella mentioned as an example in forests. So yeah, so back in the Geneva the meetings, the UN biodiversity meetings in Geneva, Dominican Republic was one of the parties that supported this target on the floor. So um, my question would be, why is this important for Dominican Republic in particular? And I know your Dominican Republic situation is very unique because you are both a small island developing state and also part of the GULAC, or the Group of Latin American and Caribbean states. So yeah, so I very interested in Dominican Republic's perspective on this. So if you can share with us.
Of course. I remember when Tina came to me and showed me this target, I was very like mixed feelings because I felt like this could be merged in the indicators of or the monitoring framework. But then I like had an insightful moment and realized this target 21, that is the other dimension, gender, is not strong enough, and we failed. As I said, with the 14th Aichi biodiversity target, we failed in mainstreaming gender with this target, and this target 21, that is the current target, is very much alike. So we need to be stronger. I don't know if this is the way, but we need to support it because we have to address gender in like emphasize gender in somehow. We with this target, we are sure that we're gonna move forward with the mainstreaming that we need, with the gender perspective around and within all the targets in the post 2020 biodiversity framework. And I have to say that many of the GRULAC member states of the Latin American and Caribbean countries support this target. The small island developing state, is a more broad approach because it's not only for the Latin American or the Caribbean, but we were very interested in knowing much longer how will this be like monitored, because this is one of the main issues for countries. You engage with targets that you need to be sure that you're gonna be able to implement and to monitor, because saying that you're gonna achieve gender equality is easy, but implementing it and monitoring how you're going with it is a very different manner. But for us at a national level, it is important to push the entities within this national biodiversity strategy that we're going to have to make for this post 2020 biodiversity framework. Push the entities that have to implement this strategy to push this target to the 22 target, and has like it's gonna be official, and it's gonna be obligatory, I don't know how to say, that you need to mainstream gender because there is a target for that. That's why it's so important for us to this target to stay in the past 2020, and we're gonna support it through the end, because we need to address gender in a specific manner to us to be successful this time.
Oh, that's great. That's a very important point that you raised, that with having a separate standalone gender equality target would make it the implementation obligatory versus just including it in one of the targets. And for the viewers who are listening now who haven't heard yet of Target 21, Target 21 actually has women in the text. There's youth, indigenous peoples, women basically, but it's more about land rights and access. And Target 22, the standalone gender equality target I showed you earlier in the screen, is about access, benefits, and the participation. So it's all encompassing rather than just a mention in one of the targets. So yeah, so especially in the monitoring of the targets, which Isabella already mentioned, it would be important if it's a standalone target um it would ensure that it's part of the monitoring process. Yeah. So yeah, thank you for sharing that, Isabella. So I'm particularly for Dominican Republic, how would this help? Let's imagine that it already happened, that this has been Target 22, the standalone gender equality target has been adopted. Let's say fast forward and it's been adopted and then you put it in your own national biodiversity strategic and action plan in Dominican Republic. How would it be felt by women in the ground or uh, first maybe in the policy level, how would it affect your policy and also the women on the ground when this gender equality target gets adopted in the post 2020 global biodiversity framework?
Okay, something very interesting when we made the sixth national report was that this 14 target didn't have the Ministry of Women as a key actor, and it was very interesting because it is the Ministry of Women, and they had a plan for mainstreaming gender at a national level, and they addressed an environmental part of this plan with actions, but we were not mainstreaming the national biodiversity strategy and this plan of action that the Ministry of Women had. And it's the same for all the activities that I just told you. We had to pick these activities because we saw that they are important to this target, but we were not like we were not obligated to do that because you don't have to report about that. The target wasn't about gender as strong as it will be if we have a target just about gender. So um, these actions were like put in good faith for us in the sixth national report as gender and biodiversity because we wanted to and because the CBD was pushing for it because of the gender perspective action plan, but we were not obligated. It was not obligatory to report about gender. Now that you have to report about gender, you have to make a whole strategy how you're gonna involve your key actors at a national level to really go around this target and how we're gonna achieve it. Now, my first thought is to engage in a truly manner the Ministry of Women for these actions to forestry and all the actions that we mentioned to be really represented and measured and monitored and involve women and all the biodiversity entities that we have here in the Dominican Republic to really engage the biodiversity thing with the gender perspective because it's gonna be obligatory and mandatory to report around that.
Yeah, you mentioned it's really powerful if it's obligatory versus voluntary because you have the option
Yes,
not to
and
do
it's
it or
it's like
to.
good faith. We did it. Ah, we're so good because we report about this, and it wasn't. But it is obligatory now. If you have something like that, you don't have to like, oh, I'm so good. I'm doing this, but it's gonna be you need to do this.
Yeah, great. And yeah, we're happy at Women for Biodiversity for you to say that you will support it until the end. And we know that we're not yet going straight to the 15 Conference of Parties in China. We still have the Nairobi meeting, and hopefully, yeah, um this will push through. Yeah, and thank you for reiterating your support on that, for Dominican Republic support on that. So Anyway, I think we just have a few more minutes. Would you have any uh maybe just a summary or maybe any last things you want to say before we wrap up our time together here?
No, I just want to show you how grateful I am. I'm very grateful to this opportunity to talk about this and reiterate my view about the theme for Biodiversity Day, that is building a shared future for all life. There's not shared future or building without gender perspective or gender equality. You need to have this within the biodiversity conservation for it to work. It doesn't work without gender mainstreaming it. You need to have women and girls involved in your biodiversity actions, because there are a big amount of people and a very different and unique way to see the things that in a different manner that other people can have it that are not women or girls. You gain so much to have a gender perspective within your initiatives that you cannot imagine how different can your conservation actions go if you truly implement gender equality within your monitoring and your implementation on the ground.
That's very wonderful. Maybe just one last follow-up question to that. Would you have a particular, because you were mentioning the unique view of women in biodiversity access and maybe conservation. Is there an example particularly that you remember in Dominican Republic where you see women having a unique perspective as maybe compared with men that would be very important in conservation or yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know. I do not have a next specific example, but I do know in these organizations that I mentioned that are led by women, women tend to care more. They care more about the communities, about the ecosystem services that came on to the communities and to the species as well. And it's very interesting to see how engaged women tend to be with the population and communities that need these services. Um, it's such a different way to manage problems because they care about other people in other communities and other way of lives, all lives, in a different manner that men and other genders have.
Mhm. I remember one example that stuck with me also was in the seas, like men usually are known to go out in the deep sea or far sea to fish, and then women would gather mollusks on the shore and maybe from mangrove. So I believe both are important ways to access biodiversity and they should be taken into account in planning conservation and restoration program. So yeah, so those things, yeah, I think that's one example I remember at least from. And I would also agree with what you said about women caring and communities being, especially since also many have the role of mothers in their families and leaders in their communities. So yeah. So
Yeah, that's
yeah, I
true.
think
And it's the
yeah.
same here for the fishing, and the men are the ones that go out to the sea and do the work, and the women here in the shore are the ones that gather the fishing products. It's the same here.
Yeah, but both are important, right? I mean, it's
Of
usually
course.
the men's work that gets attention. Like, of course, they're the ones who bring in the big catch, but of course, the mollusks by the in the shore and also other products they harvest from in the mangroves are also important in the ecosystem and also in, of course, food security, I guess. So, yeah.
Yes,
So,
as we said before, it's a chain. Everything is a chain. You cannot imagine how connected you are to the world and to other species. Even though this cockroach and this ant that made you crazy in your house is very necessary to have it here. So, when you think about biodiversity, environment, and conservation, take into account always that you're all connected.
Yeah.
That's my final message.
Yeah, thank you so much, Isabella. It's been really great talking with you, and yeah, especially on this Biodiversity Day. And I really feel with you, with Dominican Republic's commitment that women will indeed be in our shared future and building in the shared future for all life on Earth. So yeah, thank you very much. So I'm going to stop the live stream now. Yeah.